The Colorado wind cut through the mountain pass like a blade forged in ancient ice, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and something darker, something that whispered of blood long spilled and debts unpaid. Ashcroft Winterborne stood at the edge of Deathfall Canyon, his broad shoulders squared against the storm that was rolling in from the west, and felt the weight of 45 years pressing down on him like stones piled upon a grave. 25 years. A quarter-century since he had last stood on this land. 25 years of desert sand and gunfire, of orders barked in languages that tasted of copper and cordite, of young men dying in his arms while calling for mothers who would never hear them again. 25 years of running from a legacy he had never wanted, only to discover that some things cannot be outrun. They wait, patient as mountains, inevitable as winter. The Iron Peak territory stretched before him, 140,000 acres of wilderness that had belonged to his family for 6 generations. From this vantage point, he could see the dark smudge of smoke rising from the settlement 5 miles to the north, where what remained of his people gathered against the cold. Once, there had been 170 souls in the Iron Peak Pack. Now, according to the reports that had finally reached him in his self-imposed exile, barely 100 remained. The Blood Moon Massacre. Even the name tasted of ash. 8 years ago, while he had been leading reconnaissance missions through the Hindu Kush, his older brother Aldrich had led their pack into a trap that still haunted the survivors. Hunters. Not the drunk, superstitious kind who occasionally wandered too deep into pack territory with rifles and bravado. These had been professionals, military trained. They had known exactly where to strike, exactly when the pack would be most vulnerable, exactly how to kill wolves who had survived in these mountains for longer than the United States had existed as a nation. 43 dead in a single night. Among them, Aldrich himself, the alpha who had shouldered the burden their father had left behind. The alpha that Ashcroft should have been if he had possessed the courage to stay instead of the cowardice to run. The crunch of snow behind him was nearly soundless, but after 2 decades in the Marines, Ashcroft's hearing had been honed to detect the whisper of a footfall at 50 yards. He did not turn, recognizing the gait pattern, the particular weight distribution of a man who had fought beside him in 3 different combat zones. You planning to stand here until you freeze, or are you actually going to go down there and face them? Declan Ravenclaw's voice carried the particular gravel of a man who had breathed too much smoke and swallowed too much whiskey. He appeared at Ashcroft's shoulder, dark hair streaked with premature gray, eyes the color of gunmetal tracking the same smoke plume. They've been waiting 8 years for you to come home. Another hour won't kill anyone. It might, Ashcroft replied. His own voice was deeper, rougher, shaped by years of shouting orders over helicopter rotors and desert winds. Every day I delayed coming back, someone else might have died. Every week I convinced myself I wasn't ready. I was just another kind of coward. Declan was silent for a long moment. The 2 men had met in boot camp, a lifetime ago, when they had both been running from something. For Ashcroft, it had been the suffocating expectation of a father who saw his sons as tools to maintain power rather than people to be loved. For Declan, it had been poverty so grinding it had left scars deeper than any bullet could carve. They had become brothers in all the ways that mattered, bound by shared trauma and the dark humor that kept soldiers sane when the world was trying very hard to kill them. "Your brother called for you," Declan said finally. "Before he died. Thomas Ironclaw told me. Aldrich's last words were, 'Get Ashcroft. Only he can save what's left.'" The words landed like punches. Ashcroft's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath weathered skin. "Then he was wrong. I'm no savior. I'm the man who ran away when his family needed him most." "You were 19 years old," Declan countered. "Your father was beating you bloody every time you questioned his methods. You left to survive." "I left to save myself," Ashcroft corrected. "There's a difference. Survival implies necessity. What I did was simply selfish." Another gust of wind howled through the canyon, and with it came a sound that made both men tense. A howl. Not the Hollywood movie version, but the real thing. The call of a wolf who had lived as both animal and human, who understood that sound could carry meaning deeper than words. This particular howl spoke of grief, of loneliness so profound it had carved away everything except the raw need to be heard. "That's her," Declan said quietly. "Every night for the past 8 years. Same time, same place, like she's calling for someone who's never going to answer." Ashcroft's hands curled into fists. "Mara." "Your niece," Declan confirmed. "Though she'll gut anyone who calls her that to her face. She doesn't acknowledge having an uncle. Says the man who should have been her uncle died the day he joined the Marines and never looked back." The knife twisted deeper. Mara Thornheart, daughter of Aldrich, his brother who had stayed when Ashcroft fled. The last time he had seen her, she had been 12 years old, all knees and elbows and fierce golden eyes that promised she would grow into a warrior. The reports said she had made good on that promise. Before the Blood Moon massacre, she had been one of the pack's finest fighters. Fast, brutal when necessary, protective of the weak with a ferocity that reminded everyone who her father had been. Then the hunters had come, and Mara had thrown herself into the fight with the kind of courage that songs were written about. She had saved 12 children that night, holding a choke point in the northern pass for nearly an hour while the young ones fled to safety. But courage came with a price. A fragmentary grenade had detonated too close. The shrapnel had missed her heart, but found her eyes. She had survived. Her husband Dylan had not. He had died shielding her body with his own, and Mara had woken in the healer's cabin 3 days later to discover that darkness was now her eternal companion. "I heard she lives alone now," Ashcroft said, "in the cabin at Widow's Ridge." Declan nodded. "Refuses all help, hunts her own food, hauls her own water. The few people who've tried to check on her have been run off at Crossbow Point. She's become a ghost. Half the pack thinks she's gone feral. And the other half? The other half thinks she's the only one who stayed sane. She's not pretending everything is fine. She's not trying to rebuild like nothing happened. She's just existing in her grief, which is more honest than the rest of us have managed." Ashcroft turned finally to face his old friend. Declan looked older than his 42 years, the lines around his eyes carved deep by loss and responsibility. He had returned to the pack 5 years ago, had taken the position of beta when Aldrich died, and the pack needed someone with leadership experience to hold things together until a new alpha could be chosen. He had done his best, but a beta, no matter how skilled, was not an alpha. The pack had been slowly fracturing, held together only by the memory of what they had once been. "You don't want this," Declan said. It was not a question. "You never wanted to be alpha." "No," Ashcroft agreed. "I wanted to be anywhere but here, living any life but this one. But what we want and what we're responsible for are rarely the same thing." "The pack is divided about your return," Declan warned. "Half of them are desperate for a real alpha again, someone with Winterborne blood, someone who knows how to lead in a crisis. But the other half remember that you abandoned them. They remember every birthday you missed, every funeral you didn't attend, every year that passed while you were off playing soldier, and they were here, struggling to survive. They're not wrong to hate me. Hate is a strong word, but trust that you're going to have to earn." Ashcroft started down the narrow trail that wound through the rocks toward the settlement below. The path was treacherous, ice-slicked and narrow, dropping away on one side to a 1,000-foot fall that had killed more than one careless traveler over the years. He navigated it with the sure-footedness of a man who had grown up on these mountains, muscle memory overriding the years of absence. Declan fell in beside him, their boots crunching in synchronized rhythm. "There's something else you need to know," he said. "Something Thomas Ironclaw will tell you, but I'd rather you heard it from me first." The tone made Ashcroft glance over. "What?" "Your father. The great Alpha Marcus Winterborne. Beloved leader, pillar of tradition." Declan's voice dripped with acid. 30 years ago, he did something that's been kept secret from almost everyone, something that explains why the Blood Moon massacre happened at all. Ashcroft stopped walking. Around them, the wind screamed through the canyon like a living thing. "Tell me." "There was another pack. Smaller. The Ravensbrook Pack. They held territory about 50 miles west of here, good hunting land, a freshwater spring that never froze. Your father wanted it, so he invited them to a gathering, a celebration of cooperation between packs. And when they came, unarmed and trusting, he slaughtered them. Every man, woman, and child. Then he took their land and told everyone they'd been killed by hunters. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Ashcroft felt something cold and heavy settle in his chest. How do you know this? Because Thomas Ironclaw was there. He was your father's beta back then. He participated in the massacre because an alpha's word is law, and refusing would have meant his own death. He's carried that guilt for 3 decades. Declan's eyes were hard as stones. But here's the thing. One of the Ravensbrook wolves survived. A boy, 8 years old, who hid in a hollow log and watched his entire family die. His name was Konstantin Volkov, and 8 years ago he came back for revenge. The pieces fell into place like bones settling in a grave. The Blood Moon massacre wasn't random. It was justice, Declan said quietly. Twisted, bloody justice. Konstantin became a hunter, trained with the best, spent 20 years preparing. Then he came back and did to your family exactly what your father did to his. An eye for an eye, a pack for a pack. Ashcroft's hands were shaking, not from the cold. Does anyone else know? Thomas, me, and now you. Thomas is dying, Ash. Cancer. He has maybe 6 months. He wants to tell the pack the truth before he goes, wants to clear his conscience, but he's waiting for you to take the alpha position, because once the truth comes out, there's going to be hell to pay. Some wolves will want to hunt down Konstantin's remaining family. Others will say we deserved what happened. The pack could tear itself apart. Why didn't Aldrich stop it? He was alpha for 7 years before he died. He could have told the truth, made amends. Because your father made him promise not to, on his deathbed. Made both of his sons swear they would protect the Winterborne legacy, would never speak of Ravensbrook. Declan's voice dropped lower. Aldrich kept that promise. It ate him alive from the inside, but he kept it. And when Konstantin came for revenge, Aldrich knew why. He went into that fight knowing it was payment for his father's sins. That's why his last words were to call for you. He wanted someone who hadn't made that promise. Someone who could finally break the cycle. The settlement appeared below them as they rounded the final bend. It looked smaller than Ashcroft remembered, more fragile. Wooden cabins clustered together for warmth and protection, smoke rising from stone chimneys, a few solar panels glinting on southern-facing roofs. Gardens lay dormant under snow, waiting for spring. A few figures moved between buildings, bundled against the cold, going about the business of survival. This was his now, his responsibility, his burden, his chance at redemption for a sin he had not committed but had nevertheless inherited. "When do I meet with Thomas?" he asked. "Tonight. He's been waiting in the old council hall. There's a formal gathering scheduled where you'll be presented to the pack as alpha candidate. You'll have to undergo the trials, prove yourself worthy. It's tradition." I know the traditions. Ashcroft had grown up steeped in them, had fled from them, and now found himself walking back into their embrace. 3 challenges: combat, survival, wisdom. The combat trial is tomorrow at dawn. You'll face 3 of the pack's best fighters in succession, full wolf form. First blood ends each match. Declan paused. I'm one of the 3. Ashcroft looked at his friend. You're going to try to kill me? I'm going to try to beat you. There's a difference. The pack needs to see that their alpha can defend them. That means I can't go easy on you, brother or not. I wouldn't want you to. They entered the settlement proper, and immediately Ashcroft felt the weight of attention. Conversation stopped. Faces turned toward him, expressions ranging from hope to hostility. A young woman with a child on her hip stared with open desperation, as if his mere presence might somehow undo 8 years of loss. An older man, scarred and grizzled, spat deliberately in the snow and turned away. The council hall stood at the center of the settlement, a structure built from massive logs that had been old when Ashcroft's grandfather was young. Its walls bore carvings that told the history of the pack, generations of alphas and their deeds. Ashcroft's father was there, depicted as a noble leader defending his people against hunters. The lie was literally carved in stone. Inside, warmth hit like a wall. A massive fireplace dominated the far end, flames dancing across logs that would burn for hours. The space could hold the entire pack when necessary, but now only a handful of figures waited. Thomas Ironclaw sat near the fire, wrapped in blankets despite the heat. His once powerful frame reduced to skin and bone by the cancer eating him from within. His eyes, though, remained sharp as broken glass. Beside him stood a woman in her mid-30s, dark-haired and severe, arms crossed over her chest, in a posture that radiated barely contained anger. Ashcroft recognized her immediately. Sienna Blackwater, Mara's younger sister. She had been 16 the last time he saw her, all teenage fury and unformed potential. Now she had grown into that fury, had shaped it into something formidable. "So the prodigal son returns," Sienna said without preamble. Her voice could have cut steel. 25 years late, but I suppose we should be grateful you bothered to show up at all. "Sienna," Thomas rasped from his chair, "show respect." "Respect?" She laughed, sharp and bitter. "For the man who abandoned us? For the uncle who never sent a single letter, never called, never even acknowledged that his brother died trying to hold together what our grandfather broke? No, Thomas, I don't think I will." Ashcroft met her anger without flinching. He had faced worse on battlefields half a world away, had stared down men who wanted nothing more than to watch him die. Sienna's rage was justified. It was clean. It was honest. "You're right," he said simply. "I don't deserve respect. I haven't earned it. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." "Easy words," Sienna shot back. "My father said something similar once. Right before he died, protecting people you should have been here to defend." The barb struck home, as it was meant to. Ashcroft absorbed it, let it add to the weight he already carried. "I can't change the past. I can only try to make the future better." Noble sentiments from a man who knows nothing about our lives. Sienna took a step forward, and Ashcroft recognized the movement, the subtle weight shift of a fighter preparing for violence. "You know what my sister does every night? She walks 5 miles through snow and darkness to Falcon's Point, and she howls. She calls for our father, for her husband, for everyone she lost, and every night no one answers, because they're dead, and you weren't here to save them." "That's enough," Thomas said, his voice carrying more strength than his body suggested possible. "Sienna, your anger is justified, but Ashcroft is not your enemy. If you want to hate someone, hate Marcus Winterborne. Hate me. We're the ones who created this situation." Sienna's jaw worked, emotions warring across her face. Finally, she jerked her head in a nod that might have been agreement or might just have been acknowledgement. "Fine, but know this, Uncle." The title was delivered like an insult. "If you hurt my sister again, if you fail this pack the way you failed them before, I will kill you myself, alpha or not." With that, she turned and strode from the hall, slamming the heavy door behind her with enough force to rattle the carvings on the walls. Declan whistled low. "Well, that went better than I expected." "She didn't actually attack him," Thomas agreed. "I'd call that a victory." The old man gestured weakly toward a chair. "Sit, Ashcroft. We have much to discuss and very little time." Ashcroft moved closer to the fire, settling into a worn wooden chair that had probably hosted 100 alphas over the decades. The heat felt good on his wind-burned face, reminded him that he was alive, that he still had the chance to make things right. Thomas studied him in silence for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with more than just illness. "You've heard, I assume, about Ravensbrook." "Declan told me." "Then you know the burden you're inheriting is not just a pack, but a blood debt that spans 3 decades. Thomas coughed, the sound wet and painful. "Your father was a monster, Ashcroft, not in the way the humans fear werewolves are monsters, in a much more mundane way. He was a man who valued power over people, territory over family. He taught your brother to be the same, tried to teach you. The fact that you ran, rather than become what he wanted, says more about your character than any trial ever could. Running isn't courage, Ashcroft said. No, but knowing when to refuse an order is. I spent 30 years following orders I knew were wrong. You had the strength to say no at 19. That's not cowardice, boy. That's integrity. The words settled over Ashcroft like a blanket. Not absolution. He was too old to believe in easy forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Tell me about the pack, he said. What am I walking into? Thomas leaned back, his breath rattling. Division, fear, barely suppressed desperation. After Aldrich died, there was no clear successor. Your father never had other children. You had vanished. The pack needed a leader, so Declan stepped up as beta and did his best. But a beta is not an alpha, and everyone knew it. Without the proper hierarchy, the pack started fracturing. Old rivalries resurfaced. Resources became scarce. Young wolves started leaving, seeking other packs where they felt they had a future. How many have left? 23 in 8 years, mostly the young, the strong, the ones we could least afford to lose. The ones who remain are either too loyal to leave, too weak to be accepted elsewhere, or too angry to give up what little territory we have left. And Mara? Thomas's expression softened into something that might have been grief. Mara is a special kind of broken. She was supposed to be alpha after your brother, did you know that? Aldrich had been training her for years. She was strong, smart, fierce when she needed to be, but gentle with those who were afraid. The pack loved her. Then the Blood Moon massacre happened, and she lost everything, her father, her husband, her vision, her future. But she survived. Did she? Thomas met his eyes. Her body survived, but the woman who fought at Aldrich's side died that night. What lives in Widow's Ridge cabin is something else. A ghost wearing Mara's face, going through the motions of existence without truly living. We've tried reaching out, Sienna especially, but Mara refuses all contact, says she has nothing left to offer the pack, so the pack has nothing to offer her. Ashcroft thought of the howl he had heard earlier, the sound of grief so pure it had become something almost sacred. I need to see her. She won't talk to you, Declan warned. Hell, she might shoot you before you get close enough to speak. Then I'll have to be convincing. Ashcroft stood, his decision made. The trials start tomorrow. Before then, I need to do this. Thomas nodded slowly. Then go. But Ashcroft, understand something. Mara is not the child you remember. She's been forged in fire and loss. She's hard now, unyielding. If you go to her seeking the niece who used to follow you around the settlement begging for stories about the wider world, you'll be disappointed. I'm not seeking a child, Ashcroft replied. I'm seeking family. There's a difference. He left the council hall and made his way through the settlement toward the storage shed where supplies were kept. He would need snowshoes for the journey to Widow's Ridge, perhaps a lantern, though the moon was nearly full and would provide ample light once it rose. As he gathered his equipment, he became aware of eyes watching him. Pack members observing the stranger who claimed to be their new alpha, judging him, waiting to see if he would fail. Let them watch. He had spent 25 years under scrutiny far more hostile than this. Taliban fighters tracking him through mountain passes, insurgents planning ambushes, the cold, evaluating stare of superior officers deciding if he was worth promoting or just another expendable grunt. These wolves were his people, whether they acknowledged him or not. Their judgment mattered, but it would not stop him. The walk to Widow's Ridge took 2 hours through deepening snow and gathering dark. The path was treacherous, winding through old-growth forest where trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with accumulated ice. Several times, Ashcroft heard movement in the darkness around him. Wolves, pack members following at a distance, making sure he truly was heading where he claimed, or perhaps ensuring he didn't get lost and freeze to death before the trials even began. Either way, he appreciated the attention to practical matters. The cabin appeared suddenly, tucked into a hollow where 2 ridges met to form a natural windbreak. It was small, rough-hewn, the kind of structure that had been thrown together for function rather than comfort. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, and a faint glow showed through cracks in the shuttered windows. Someone was home. Ashcroft approached carefully, making enough noise that he wouldn't surprise anyone. In this world, surprises got people killed. When he was still 50 feet from the door, a voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "That's close enough." The voice was female, hard-edged, carrying the particular timbre of someone who had learned to project authority without needing to see the people she was commanding. "I don't know who you are, but you have 10 seconds to state your business before I put a crossbow bolt through your chest. This is private property, and I don't welcome visitors." Ashcroft stopped walking, raised his hands where they could be seen, though he doubted she could see them. "My name is Ashcroft Winterborne. I've come to speak with Mara Thornheart." Silence. Then, "I don't have an uncle named Ashcroft. My uncle died 25 years ago when he decided being a Marine was more important than being family. So unless you're a ghost, you're lying about who you are." "I'm not lying, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to talk." "Then talk from there. I can hear you fine." Ashcroft took a breath, organizing his thoughts. The cold was seeping through his jacket, but he ignored it. Discomfort was an old friend. "I know I don't deserve your time. I know I abandoned this pack, abandoned you, abandoned everyone who needed me. I know that your father died calling my name, hoping I would come back and save what was left. I know I'm 25 years too late for any of it to matter." "Good. Then leave." "I can't. Because I'm here now, and I'm not running again. The pack needs an alpha. Whether they want me or not, whether you want me or not, I'm going to take that responsibility. But before I do, I needed to come here. I needed to see the person I hurt the most by leaving." "You flatter yourself." Mara's voice dripped with scorn. "You think you're that important? That your absence was the worst thing that happened to me? Let me educate you, Uncle. My father died in my arms. My husband threw himself on a grenade to save my worthless life. I woke up in darkness that will never end and discovered that everything I trained for, everything I was meant to become, was gone. You leaving? That doesn't even make the top 10 list of my traumas." The words should have stung. Instead, Ashcroft felt something like relief. This was honest. This was real. This was a woman who had stopped pretending that politeness mattered more than truth. "You're right," he said. "I'm not that important. But I'm still here, and I still want to talk. Not as alpha to pack member, not as uncle to niece, just as one broken person to another." More silence, long enough that Ashcroft began to think she would simply ignore him until he left. Then the cabin door cracked open, revealing a sliver of firelight and the silhouette of a woman. 5 minutes, Mara said. "Then you leave and never come back. Understood?" "Understood." He approached the cabin slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When he reached the door, she stepped back, allowing him entry. The interior was sparse, functional. A cot in one corner, a small table and chair, supplies stored in wooden crates with military precision. No decorations, no personal touches. Nothing that suggested this was a home rather than simply a place to avoid dying from exposure. Mara stood near the fireplace, and for the first time, Ashcroft could truly see her. She had been beautiful once, he remembered that. Sharp features, golden eyes that missed nothing, the kind of graceful strength that came from years of training. That beauty remained, but it had been refined by suffering into something harder, more austere. Her eyes were different now, clouded with scar tissue, tracking sound rather than sight. She wore simple clothing, practical and worn, and her hands rested near her waist where a knife was undoubtedly sheathed. "You're staring," she said flatly. "I'm sorry. I was just thinking you look like your father." "My father was 6'4" and built like a bear. I'm 5'7" and weigh 130 pounds. Try again." "I meant your bearing, the way you hold yourself. Aldrich could walk into a room and everyone would know he was alpha, even if he never said a word. You have that same presence." Mara's jaw tightened. "My father is dead. I am not him. I will never be him. And whatever you think you see when you look at me, You're wrong." Ashcroft moved toward the fire, warming his hands. "What happened that night? At Blood Moon?" "Why? So you can catalog the failures of everyone who was actually here while you were off playing hero somewhere else?" "Because I need to understand. Because the only way to prevent it from happening again is to know exactly what went wrong." Mara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had lost some of its sharp edge, replaced by something rawer. "They knew everything. Where we would be when we would be vulnerable. They had military-grade weapons, thermal imaging, communications equipment. It wasn't a hunt. It was an execution. They hit us from 3 sides simultaneously, driving us toward Deathfall Canyon where they had snipers positioned. Anyone who tried to fight was cut down. Anyone who tried to run was herded into kill zones." "How did you survive?" "I was with the children, 12 of them, ranging from 4 to 13 years old. When the attack started, my father ordered me to get them to safety. There's a passage through the northern rocks, narrow enough that only wolves in human form can navigate it. I took the children there and held the entrance while they escaped. 23 minutes. Her voice went distant, remembering. "I held that position for 23 minutes against 6 trained soldiers. I had a knife and a handgun with 2 magazines. That's it." "You killed 6 men?" "I killed 4. The other 2 retreated when they realized I wasn't going down easily. But then one of them threw a grenade. I tried to throw it back, but it detonated in midair. The blast took my vision and perforated my right lung. I was drowning in my own blood when Dylan found me." Ashcroft heard the crack in her voice when she said her husband's name. "He picked me up, started carrying me toward the healer's cabin, but there was another sniper. Dylan saw the laser sight on my chest, and he stepped in front of it. The bullet hit him in the base of the skull. He died instantly, still holding me." Mara's hands were shaking now, the only outward sign of the emotion roiling beneath her controlled exterior. "I woke up 3 days later. They told me Dylan was dead, that my father was dead, that 43 members of our pack were dead, and I couldn't even see their graves to say goodbye." The silence that followed was heavy with more than just words. It was the weight of loss so profound it became a physical thing, pressing down on both of them. "I should have been here," Ashcroft said quietly. "I should have been the one holding that passage. I should have died instead of Dylan, instead of Aldrich, instead of any of them." "Yes," Mara agreed simply. "You should have, but you weren't, and they did, and now we're both stuck with the consequences. I can't bring them back." "No, you can't. So what exactly do you think you can do?" Ashcroft turned to face her fully. "I can make sure it never happens again. I can find out who sent those hunters and why. I can rebuild what my father and Aldrich left broken. I can be the alpha this pack deserves instead of the alpha they've been cursed with." "Noble words," Mara said, "but I've heard noble words before. My father was full of them. They didn't save him. They won't save you." "Probably not, but I have to try." Mara moved closer, navigating the small space with the confidence of someone who had memorized every inch of it. When she was close enough that he could smell the wood smoke and pine scent that clung to her, she reached out. Her hand found his face, fingers tracing his features with the gentle precision of someone reading Braille. "You feel old," she said softly. "Older than you should. 45? "Yes. And you've been to war. I can feel the scar tissue. Here." Her fingers brushed a ridge along his jaw. "And here." They traced a line across his forehead. "How many men have you killed?" "I stopped counting at 30. "Do you dream about them?" "Every night." Her hand fell away. "Good. At least you're not a psychopath. Those die easy. Men with consciences last longer." "Is that what you want? For me to last?" Mara turned away, moving back toward the fire. "I don't want anything, Uncle. I stopped wanting things the day I realized wanting them didn't matter. The universe doesn't care what we want. It takes what it takes and leaves us to deal with what remains." "That's a bleak worldview." "That's an honest worldview. You want to be alpha? Fine. Take the position. Undergo the trials. Make your noble speeches about rebuilding and protecting. But don't come to me looking for absolution or approval or whatever it is you think you need from the damaged woman living in the woods. I'm not your redemption project." Ashcroft absorbed that, recognized the truth in it. "You're right. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Apologies are just another form of wanting things, wanting forgiveness, wanting understanding, wanting to feel better about yourself. I told you, I don't want anything." "Then why did you let me in? Why not just shoot me like you threatened?" For the first time, something that might have been humor flickered across Mara's face. "Because Sienna would have been annoyed. And because part of me was curious what kind of man walks away from his family for 25 years and then has the audacity to walk back and claim he's going to save them. And what's your assessment? You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the stupidest. Possibly both." Before Ashcroft could respond, a howl split the night. Different from the one he had heard earlier, this was urgent, alarm rather than grief. Both he and Mara tensed, their bodies responding to a sound that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the wolf lurking beneath human skin. "That's Sienna," Mara said, already moving toward where weapons hung on the wall. "Something's wrong." They burst from the cabin together, Mara moving with confidence despite her blindness, following terrain she knew by heart. Ashcroft kept pace, his longer legs eating up the distance. Around them, the forest came alive with movement. Wolves responding to the call, converging on the settlement. When they emerged from the tree line, chaos greeted them. The settlement was in disarray, pack members running between cabins, voices raised in panic. Near the council hall, a group had gathered around something on the ground. Someone injured, or worse. Declan appeared out of the crowd, blood on his hands and fury in his eyes. "We've been attacked," he said without preamble. 3 wolves dead, another 4 injured. They hit the southern perimeter 20 minutes ago." "Who?" Ashcroft demanded. "Hunters, professional ones, military tactics, coordinated movements. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage while minimizing their own risk." Declan's hands clenched into fists. "This is Blood Moon all over again." Mara had gone completely still beside him. When she spoke, her voice was colder than the mountain wind. "No. Blood Moon was 8 years ago. Konstantin Volkov is in his 50s now. This is someone else. Someone new." "Or someone who waited to strike," a new voice said. Old Thomas emerged from the council hall, leaning heavily on a cane. Despite the late hour and the chaos, his eyes were sharp with terrible understanding. "Konstantin had a younger brother, Victor. He would be 45 now, the same age as you, Ashcroft." The implications crashed down like an avalanche. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't opportunistic hunters stumbling onto pack territory. This was revenge, part 2. The Volkov family was not finished. They had taken their pound of flesh 8 years ago, and now they were back for more. Ashcroft moved toward the bodies, forcing himself to look at what had been done. 3 wolves, young males, all between 20 and 25. They had been shot with silver-tipped ammunition, the kind that prevented werewolves from healing. Quick kills, efficient, professional. "They're sending a message," Mara said quietly from behind him. She had followed, navigating by sound and scent. This was a demonstration. They could have killed more. They chose not to. They're telling us they can hit whenever they want, wherever they want, and we can't stop them. "Then we need to make them understand they're wrong," Ashcroft replied. He turned to face the assembled pack members, saw fear and desperation and anger in equal measures. These were his people now, his responsibility, his burden to bear. "Everyone who's able to fight, arm yourselves and spread out in defensive positions. 2-person teams. No one goes anywhere alone. Anyone who can't fight gets to the center of the settlement, inside the council hall. We turn this place into a fortress until we know what we're dealing with." "Who put you in charge?" someone called from the crowd. "You're not alpha yet." "No," Ashcroft agreed. "I'm not. But I'm the one with 20 years of military experience, and right now that's what you need. So you can either follow my orders and maybe survive the night, or you can stand here arguing about hierarchy while hunters pick you off one by one. Your choice." The pack hesitated, momentum balanced on a knife edge. Then Declan stepped forward, placing himself visibly at Ashcroft's side. "I'm with him," he said loudly. "Anyone who trusts me, follow his lead." That broke the deadlock. Wolves began moving, some to gather weapons, others to establish defensive positions. Within minutes, the chaos had resolved into something resembling military organization. Ashcroft allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. These people might not trust him yet, but they understood survival, and survival required cooperation. Mara touched his arm. "You just took command of a pack that hasn't accepted you as alpha. You realize that's going to cause problems. Let it. We'll deal with politics after we deal with staying alive." Spoken like a true soldier. There might have been approval in her voice, or it might have been mockery. With Mara, it was hard to tell. The night stretched long and tense. Ashcroft rotated through the defensive positions, checking readiness, bolstering morale where it flagged. He found himself falling back into patterns learned in Fallujah and Kandahar, the muscle memory of a warrior returning as naturally as breathing. This was what he was good at. Not politics, not pack dynamics, but the simple, brutal calculus of keeping people alive when others wanted them dead. Dawn came eventually, gray and cold, painting the world in shades of slate and ash. No further attacks had come, but the message had been delivered clearly enough. The Volkov family was not finished with the Winterborne pack. This was only the beginning. As the sun climbed higher, Thomas called Ashcroft back to the council hall. Inside, most of the pack's remaining leadership had gathered. Sienna stood near her sister, protective and fierce. Declan looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes from a sleepless night. Other faces Ashcroft half recognized, pack members who had been children when he left and were now adults bearing the scars of 8 hard years. "The trials were supposed to begin today," Thomas said. "The combat test, but circumstances have changed." "Cancel them," Ashcroft said immediately. "We don't have time for ritual when we're under threat." "No." The voice came from Mara. She stepped forward, her blind eyes somehow finding him despite the impossibility. "You need to do the trials. The pack needs to see that you're worthy. Otherwise, you're just a stranger giving orders, and when things get desperate, they'll start questioning whether they should follow you. You need to be alpha in truth, not just in convenience." "She's right," Declan agreed. "The trials bind the pack to you. Without that bond, we're just a group of scared individuals. With it, we're a fighting unit. We need that unity now more than ever." Ashcroft wanted to argue, but he recognized the truth when he heard it. "Fine. When?" "Now," Thomas declared. "The first trial. Combat. You will face 3 opponents. Declan, Sienna, and Marcus Flint. All are skilled warriors. All will try their absolute best to defeat you. If you win all 3 matches, you pass. If you lose any of them, you fail, and will need to find another candidate." "And who exactly did you have in mind?" Ashcroft asked dryly. "The pack isn't exactly overflowing with Winterborne bloodline options." Thomas's smile was grim. "Then I suggest you win." The pack gathered at the old fighting circle, a cleared space on the northern edge of the settlement where challenges had been settled for generations. Snow had been brushed away, revealing frozen earth. The circle was marked with stones, each carved with the name of an alpha who had stood here before. Ashcroft saw his father's name, his grandfather's. A lineage stretching back 6 generations, all the way to the first Winterborne who had claimed these mountains. Now it was his turn to add his name to that legacy, or to die trying. Declan would fight first. He stripped off his heavy coat, standing in just jeans and a t-shirt despite the cold. His body was marked with scars from a lifetime of violence, a road map of every fight that had almost killed him. Ashcroft matched him, shedding his own outer layers, feeling the cold bite into bare skin. "No hard feelings," Declan said. "None," Ashcroft replied, "but I'm still going to beat you." "We'll see." The change came over both men simultaneously. It was not the Hollywood version, all screaming agony and bones breaking. That was only true for young wolves still learning control. For warriors like them, the transformation was smooth, natural, a shifting of form as easy as breathing. Ashcroft's wolf was massive, dark-furred with silver at the muzzle and paws, built for power rather than speed. Declan's was leaner, russet-colored, built like a blade. They circled each other, and Ashcroft felt his awareness expand. The world became sharper in wolf form, sounds louder, scents more complex. He could smell Declan's nervousness, the adrenaline pumping through his friend's system, could hear the elevated heartbeat that spoke of excitement and fear in equal measures. They clashed in a fury of teeth and claws, two predators testing each other's strength. Declan was fast, darting in to snap at Ashcroft's flanks before dancing away. But Ashcroft was stronger, his greater mass allowing him to shrug off hits that would have staggered a smaller wolf. He waited, patient, conserving energy while Declan wore himself down trying to find an opening. Then, when his friend overextended on an attack, Ashcroft struck. He ducked under Declan's lunge, came up hard inside his guard, and clamped powerful jaws around his throat, not biting down, just holding. The message clear. "I could kill you right now." Declan went still, submitted. The fight was over. They separated, both transforming back to human form, breathing hard. Blood marked where claws had found purchase, but nothing serious, nothing that wouldn't heal in hours. "You've gotten better," Declan said, accepting a towel from someone in the crowd. "Or I've gotten slower." "Both, probably," Ashcroft replied. He looked toward Thomas. "Who's next?" Sienna stepped forward, and her smile was not friendly. Sienna Blackwater moved into the fighting circle with the fluid grace of someone who had been born to violence. At 35, she had spent the last 8 years honing herself into a weapon, channeling her grief over her father's death and her sister's ruin into pure, focused aggression. Where Declan had fought with the disciplined efficiency of a soldier, Sienna fought like a wildfire, unpredictable, consuming, merciless. Ashcroft watched her strip down to fighting weight, noting the lean muscle that spoke of countless hours of training. She was smaller than him by a considerable margin, but size meant less in wolf form than humans typically assumed. Speed could overcome strength. Cunning could defeat raw power. And Sienna had spent 8 years dreaming of this moment, imagining what she would do if she ever got her hands on the uncle who had abandoned them. "I want you to know something before we start," Sienna said, her voice carrying across the assembled pack. "I'm not fighting you because tradition demands it. I'm fighting you because I've hated you for 25 years. Because every time my father talked about his brother, there was this sadness in his eyes, this wound that never healed. Because when he died, one of his last thoughts was probably wishing you were there. So when I hurt you, and I will hurt you, understand that it's personal." Ashcroft nodded slowly. "I understand, and I accept it. Do your worst." The transformation rippled through Sienna like lightning, faster than Ashcroft had ever seen anyone change. One moment she was human. The next, she was a wolf of burnished copper, smaller than his dark form, but moving with a speed that made his earlier fight with Declan look like slow motion. She hit him like a missile, claws raking across his shoulder before he could even process the attack, teeth snapping for his throat. He twisted away, using his bulk to throw her off, but she was already moving, already circling for another angle of attack. This was not going to be a test of strength. This was going to be about whether he could match her speed, anticipate her movements, survive long enough to find an opening. Sienna came at him again, feinting left before darting right, her jaws closing on his foreleg with crushing force. Pain exploded through Ashcroft's nervous system, bright and clarifying. He roared, the sound echoing off the surrounding mountains, and brought his massive weight down on her back. For a moment he had her pinned, but she writhed like smoke, impossibly flexible, slipping from his grasp and opening another line of red across his flank as she escaped. Blood marked the frozen ground now. His blood. First blood technically meant the match should end, but Sienna showed no signs of stopping, and Ashcroft realized with cold clarity that she intended to push this far beyond a ritual combat. She wanted to break him, to prove that he was not worthy, to make him pay for every year of absence with interest compounded in pain. He respected that. Even as his body screamed protest, even as his wolf instincts howled at him to fight back with lethal force, he respected the purity of her rage. So he let her come, let her land hits that he could have avoided, let her fury spend itself against his body like waves against stone. Because sometimes the only way to heal a wound was to let it bleed. But there were limits. When Sienna went for his throat a third time, when her teeth actually broke skin and he felt the hot rush of arterial blood, Ashcroft's patience ended. He caught her mid-lunge, his greater mass finally telling, and slammed her into the earth hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. Before she could recover, he had her pinned, one massive paw on her chest, jaws hovering inches from her exposed throat. They stayed frozen like that, both of them breathing hard, both of them bleeding. Around them, the pack watched in absolute silence. This was the moment of decision. Ashcroft could kill her. Pack law gave him that right. She had drawn first blood and continued fighting past the point of ritual. She had challenged not just his worthiness, but his very right to exist. By every tradition their people held sacred, he would be justified in ending her life. He stepped back instead, released her, transformed back to human form, standing naked and bleeding in the morning cold, and offered her his hand. "Your father," he said quietly, his voice rough from exertion and the wound at his throat. "Aldrich. He wrote to me. Did you know that? Every year on my birthday. Letters I never answered because I was too much of a coward to face what I'd done. But he kept writing anyway. And in every letter, he told me about his daughters, about Mara, who was going to be the greatest alpha our pack had ever seen, and about Sienna, who had a fire in her that could burn down mountains if she chose. Sienna had transformed back as well, crouching in the dirt, tears cutting tracks through the blood on her face. He talked about you? All the time, apparently. He never gave up hope that I'd come home, that his little brother would remember where he came from and return to help lead our people. Ashcroft's hand was still extended. I can't be the man he hoped I'd become, but I can try to be the man he needed. Will you let me try? For a long moment, Sienna just stared at his hand. Then slowly, she reached up and took it, let him pull her to her feet. And when she spoke, her voice was still hard, but no longer quite so sharp. I don't forgive you. I don't expect you to. But I'll work with you. For the pack. For my father's memory. For Mara, who deserves better than to live like a ghost in the woods. Sienna's grip tightened. Just know that if you fail us, if you run again, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth, and I will make you suffer before you die. Understood? Understood. Thomas's voice carried across the circle, wavering but authoritative. The second trial is complete. Ashcroft Winterborne has proven his strength and his mercy in equal measure. The pack acknowledges him. A pause. Marcus Flint, you're up. The third fighter who stepped into the circle was a man Ashcroft barely remembered. Marcus had been a teenager when Ashcroft left, all gangly limbs and unformed potential. Now he was 40 years old, built like a brick wall, with scars that spoke of a hard life and harder choices. He moved with the deliberate care of someone who had learned that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to graves. I don't hate you, Marcus said as they faced each other. I don't know you well enough to hate you, but I need to know you can protect my family, my mate, my 2 daughters. So I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to fight you like you're a threat that needs to be put down. If you can survive that, then maybe you're strong enough to keep us all alive. Ashcroft appreciated the honesty. Then let's find out. This fight was different from the previous 2. Marcus was not fast like Sienna or technical like Declan. He was patient, methodical. He fought like a siege engine, applying pressure steadily, forcing Ashcroft to defend, to retreat, to expend energy holding ground rather than taking it. His wolf form was slate gray, massive shoulders built for grappling, and he used every ounce of that power to try to overwhelm Ashcroft's defenses. They crashed together like mountains colliding, neither giving an inch. Claws scraped against thick fur and thicker hide. Teeth sought purchase on necks and flanks. It was brutal, exhausting, a test not of speed or skill but of pure, stubborn endurance. Who would break first? Who would make the mistake that opened them up to a killing blow? Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Ashcroft could feel his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air, his body demanding that he stop this madness and submit. But submission meant failure, and failure meant these people would face the next threat without a real alpha to lead them. So he endured, pushed past the pain, found reserves of strength he had forgotten he possessed. And slowly, gradually, Marcus began to slow. His attacks came a fraction of a second slower. His defenses were not quite as tight. Age and injury were catching up to him, the cumulative damage of a lifetime spent fighting taking its toll. Ashcroft saw the opening and took it, ducking under a heavy paw swipe and coming up inside Marcus's guard, jaws locking around his opponent's throat for the third time that morning. Marcus went still. Submitted. The fight was over. They separated, both transforming back, both covered in blood and sweat and mud. Marcus extended his hand, and when Ashcroft took it, the other man's grip was firm and respectful. "You'll do," Marcus said simply. "My family is yours to protect, Alpha." The word hung in the air. Alpha. Not candidate, not potential. The acknowledgement had been given, the trials passed. Ashcroft felt something shift in his chest, some invisible weight settling onto shoulders that had carried many burdens, but never this particular one. He was Alpha now, for better or worse. These people were his responsibility until death released him from the duty. Thomas stood with difficulty, leaning heavily on his cane, and his voice when he spoke carried the weight of ceremony and centuries of tradition. "The combat trial is complete. Ashcroft Winterborne has defeated 3 warriors of the Iron Peak Pack in honorable combat. He has shown strength, skill, and mercy. The pack acknowledges him as worthy." The old man paused, his breath rattling. But worthiness alone does not make an alpha. Tomorrow, the survival trial, and the day after, if you still live, the trial of wisdom. Only then will the transformation be complete. Ashcroft nodded his understanding. Around him, the pack began to disperse, some looking satisfied, others still skeptical, all of them marked by the knowledge that they were living in dangerous times and had just bound themselves to a man who had been absent for most of their lives. It was not an ideal situation, but it was the situation they had, and they would make it work or die trying. Mara approached as he was pulling his clothes back on, her movements sure despite the blindness, following the sound of his breathing and the scent of fresh blood. "You fought well," she said. "Sienna went for the kill. Marcus tried to break you. Declan tested your limits. Any one of them could have ended you if you'd been weaker. But I wasn't." "No, you weren't." She tilted her head, listening to something he couldn't hear. "There's a storm coming. Not weather. Something worse. I can feel it." Ashcroft looked toward the south, where the attack had come from the previous night. "The Volkov family." "That's my guess. 8 years ago they came for blood. Now they're back for the rest." Mara's expression was unreadable. "You need to understand something. Konstantin Volkov was driven by rage and grief. He wanted revenge for his family, and he took it. But Victor, his younger brother, he's different. Konstantin was a warrior. Victor is a tactician. He won't attack out of passion. He'll attack because he's calculated every angle and determined that he can win." "You know him?" "I know the type. I've fought them before. Men who see war as a chess game, who value strategy over honor, who will sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve victory." She moved closer, her voice dropping. "Those men are the most dangerous enemies you can face because they don't care about glory or reputation. They only care about results. Then we need to be smarter than him, anticipate his moves, force him into making mistakes. Easier said than done when you're defending and he's attacking. The aggressor always has the advantage of choosing when and where to strike." Mara's hand found his arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. "But there might be a way, if you're willing to take a risk that could get you killed." Before Ashcroft could ask what she meant, Declan appeared at his shoulder, urgency written across his features. "We have a problem. One of our scouts just reported back from the southern perimeter. There's a camp, military-grade tents, communications equipment, at least 20 armed men. They're not hiding. They want us to know they're there." "How far?" 3 miles, just beyond our territorial boundary. They're camped on public land, completely legal by human standards, but close enough that the message is clear." Ashcroft's jaw tightened. They're establishing a forward operating base, setting up for a sustained campaign rather than hit-and-run raids. He had seen this tactic used in Afghanistan. Pin the enemy in place, cut off their supply lines, apply pressure until they broke or made a mistake. "How long can we hold out if they lay siege?" "Food we have enough of for maybe 2 months if we ration carefully," Declan replied. "Water is not a problem, we have springs, but ammunition, medical supplies, those are limited. And if they're smart, they'll start targeting anyone who tries to leave the settlement. We'll be prisoners in our own territory." "Then we don't wait for them to tighten the noose, we take the fight to them." "That's suicide," Sienna interjected, joining the conversation. "They're trained soldiers with modern weapons. We're werewolves, which sounds impressive until you realize that bullets kill us just as dead as they kill humans. Maybe we heal faster, but silver-tipped rounds negate even that advantage." "She's right," Marcus added. "A direct assault is exactly what they'd expect. They're probably hoping we're stupid enough to try it so they can mow us down in the open." Mara's voice cut through the debate like a blade. "Then we don't assault them. We make them assault us. On ground of our choosing, with traps prepared, with every advantage stacked in our favor." Everyone turned to look at her. She stood slightly apart from the group, her blind eyes seeming to stare into a distance only she could perceive. When she continued, her voice carried the certainty of someone who had thought through every angle. "There's a canyon about 6 miles northeast of here, Deathfall Canyon. Narrow entrance, high walls, only one way in and one way out. If we can lure their forces into that kill box, we can rain down on them from above. Rocks, arrows, whatever we have. Turn their superior firepower into a liability." "How do we lure them?" Ashcroft asked, his tactical mind already working through the logistics. Mara smiled, and there was nothing warm in the expression. "We give them a target they can't resist. We make them think they can capture the new Alpha and the broken Omega who used to be next in line. 2 Winterborns for the price of 1 ambush." The plan was audacious to the point of insanity, but the more Ashcroft considered it, the more sense it made. Viktor Volkov had come for revenge against the Winterborne bloodline specifically. Capturing or killing Ashcroft and Mara would be the ultimate victory, proof that the debt had been paid in full. He would commit significant resources to such an opportunity, potentially leaving his base camp vulnerable, or at least pulling his forces into a position where they could be engaged on more favorable terms. "It's risky," Thomas said from where he sat, listening to the debate. "If anything goes wrong, we lose our Alpha before he's even completed the trials. And Mara, you'd be putting yourself in the line of fire again. Are you certain you want to do this?" "No," Mara replied honestly. "But I don't see a better option. We're going to have to fight sooner or later. Better to do it on our terms." Ashcroft looked around at the assembled pack members, saw the fear and determination in equal measures. These were his people now, his responsibility, his burden. "We do it tomorrow. That gives us 24 hours to prepare the trap, position our people, and plan for every contingency we can think of. Mara and I will act as bait. Everyone else establishes firing positions on the canyon walls. When Volkov's people enter the canyon, we spring the trap." "And if they don't enter?" Sienna asked. "If they're smart enough to recognize an obvious ambush?" "Then we improvise," Ashcroft said grimly. "But one way or another, this ends soon. We can't live under siege indefinitely. Better to force a confrontation now while we still have the strength to fight." The rest of the day was spent in frantic preparation. Ashcroft moved through the settlement, organizing defenses, checking equipment, talking to pack members who were alternating between terror and grim determination. Many of them had never fought in a real battle. The Blood Moon Massacre had been an ambush, quick and brutal, giving victims no chance to mount an organized defense. This would be different. This would be planned, controlled, at least in theory. As night fell, Ashcroft found himself standing on the walls of the old wooden palisade that surrounded the settlement's core. It was more symbolic than defensive, built generations ago when the threats had been less sophisticated. But from this vantage point, he could see the lights of Victor's camp to the south, a constellation of artificial stars marking enemy positions. "Can't sleep?" Declan's voice came from behind him. "Too much to think about." His old friend climbed up to join him on the parapet, two middle-aged warriors watching the night and remembering other nights in other places. "You know this might not work. Volkov could see through the bait, or he could commit overwhelming force that we can't contain even with the terrain advantage." "I know. And you're doing it anyway." "Because the alternative is worse. Waiting here while they slowly strangle us is not a strategy. It's just a slower death." Ashcroft glanced at Declan. "You don't have to come tomorrow. You're beta now. If I die, the pack needs you to lead them." "If you die, the pack is finished anyway," Declan replied bluntly. "Volkov won't stop with you. He'll kill everyone who carries Winterborne blood, and then he'll probably kill the rest of us just for being associated. No, brother, I'm coming, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we both walk out of that canyon alive." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the enemy camp, each lost in his own thoughts. Finally, Declan spoke again, his voice careful. "There's something I need to tell you. About the Blood Moon massacre. About my part in it." Ashcroft felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What do you mean?" "The hunters knew exactly where to hit, exactly when. I always wondered how they had such perfect intelligence." Declan's hands were shaking now. "Last year, I found something in the old records, communications logs from around that time. Someone had been sending encrypted messages to an outside source, detailed information about pack movements, defensive positions, the timing of the ritual gatherings." "You're saying there was a spy?" "I'm saying I think I was the spy, not intentionally. But remember when I came back to help Aldrich, about a year before the massacre? I brought my personal equipment with me. Military-grade radio, encrypted satellite phone. I thought I'd secured it properly, but what if I didn't? What if someone hacked my communications, used my equipment to track the pack's movements?" Declan's voice was agonized. "What if I led Constantine right to them?" The confession hung between them like smoke. Ashcroft processed it, running through the implications. If Declan was right, if his equipment had been compromised, then the massacre had been partly his fault. Not through malice, but through carelessness. A simple security failure that had cost 43 lives. "Does anyone else know?" Ashcroft asked finally. "No. I only figured it out last year, and I've been carrying it alone since then. But you needed to know. Because if Victor is anything like his brother, he might try the same trick again. Might try to compromise our communications, use our own technology against us. Then we go dark. No electronic communications. Everything face-to-face or through traditional methods. Runners if we need to coordinate across distances." Ashcroft turned to face his friend fully. "And Declan, what happened at Blood Moon? If your theory is right, it was a mistake, not a betrayal. You didn't choose this. Konstantin Volkov chose to murder innocents. That blood is on his hands, not yours. Try telling that to the families of the dead." "I will if I have to, but right now, I need my beta focused on tomorrow, not drowning in guilt over yesterday. Can you do that?" Declan straightened, forcing himself back into the mental discipline that had kept him alive through 2 decades of warfare. "Yes, Alpha, I can do that." The title was not lost on Ashcroft. Beta addressing Alpha, the formal acknowledgement of hierarchy that meant the pack's second was fully committed. "Good. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." After Declan left, Ashcroft remained on the wall, watching the night and thinking about all the ways the next day could go wrong. He was still there an hour later when another presence joined him, this one moving with the careful precision of someone navigating by memory and sound rather than sight. "You should sleep too," Mara said, settling onto the parapet beside him. Tomorrow we're going to be running for our lives through difficult terrain. Exhaustion will get you killed faster than bullets. Probably. But my brain won't shut down. Too many variables. Too many things that could go wrong. Welcome to command. That feeling never goes away, by the way. You just learn to function despite it. She tilted her head, listening to the wind. My father used to stand here every night, same spot, looking out at the territory he was responsible for protecting. Sometimes I'd join him, and we'd talk about leadership, about the weight of making decisions that could get people killed. What did he tell you? That the secret was to care deeply about every life under your protection, but also to accept that you couldn't save everyone, that sometimes the best you could do was save most of them, and you had to live with the ones you lost. Mara was quiet for a moment. He also said that the worst thing a leader could do was make decisions based on trying to avoid feeling guilty. That guilt was the price of command, and anyone who tried to escape it would end up getting more people killed, not fewer. Wise man. He was, until Konstantin Volkov put a silver bullet through his skull. The bitterness in Mara's voice was like acid. All his wisdom, all his strength, all his careful planning, none of it mattered when the real test came. Did he die well? The question seemed to surprise her. She considered it, and when she answered, some of the bitterness had faded. Yes. He died holding the line so others could escape. He died knowing that his sacrifice bought time for children to reach safety. He died as Alpha, protecting his pack. If death has to come, I suppose that's the best way for it to happen. And Dylan, your husband? Mara's expression shifted, grief carving lines in her face that had not been there before. Dylan died loving me. He died putting himself between me and harm without hesitation, without regret. His last moment was spent saving the woman he loved. Her voice cracked. I hate him for it. I hate that he loved me enough to die. I hate that I survived and he didn't. I hate that every day I wake up and he's still gone and I'm still here. That's survivor's guilt talking. That's reality talking. I should have died that night. I was the warrior, the fighter, the one trained since childhood for combat. Dylan was a scholar. He studied our history, kept our records, taught the young ones about where we came from. He had no business being in a battle zone. But he came anyway because I was there, and he died because I wasn't good enough to protect myself. Ashcroft reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his hand over hers. You saved 12 children that night. Dylan died making sure you survived to save them. If he could see what his sacrifice accomplished, do you think he'd regret it? Mara was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. No, he'd do it again. That's what makes it so hard. He died exactly the way he wanted to, protecting what mattered most to him. And I'm left here, having to live with being that important to someone. They sat together on the wall as the moon rose higher, two broken people carrying wounds that would never fully heal, preparing for a battle that might kill them both. Eventually, Mara stood, preparing to leave. Tomorrow, she said, when we're running through that canyon with bullets flying, I need you to promise me something. What? If it comes down to a choice between saving me and completing the mission, you complete the mission. The pack needs an alpha. They don't need a blind woman who can barely stand to be around other people. That's not happening, Ashcroft said flatly. We both make it out or neither of us does. That's a stupid promise for an alpha to make. Then I guess I'm a stupid alpha. He stood as well, facing her. Mara, you're not just some random pack member. You're Aldrich's daughter. You're the woman who held a choke point against professional soldiers for 23 minutes. You're family, and I don't leave family behind. Not again, not ever. She turned away, but not before he saw moisture gleaming on her cheeks. You barely know me. That's my fault, not yours. But I'm going to fix it, assuming we survive tomorrow. You're an idiot. Probably, but I'm an idiot who keeps his promises. Mara left without another word, vanishing into the darkness with the sure-footedness of someone who had long since learned to navigate without eyes. Ashcroft watched her go and wondered if they would both live long enough for him to know her as something other than a collection of scars and survival instincts. Dawn came gray and cold, painting the world in shades of slate and ash. The pack assembled in tense silence, everyone understanding what the day would bring. Ashcroft stood before them, still not quite believing that these people were his responsibility, his burden, his purpose. "Today we fight," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered wolves. "Not because we want to, not because we chose this, but because enemies have come to our territory seeking our blood, and we will not give it to them without cost. Some of you have never been in combat before. Some of you are terrified. That's fine. Fear is natural. Fear keeps you alive. What matters is that you stand together, fight together, and trust the people beside you." He paused, meeting as many eyes as he could. "I'm asking you to trust me, to follow orders even when they seem wrong, to hold your positions even when every instinct screams at you to run. I know I haven't earned that trust yet. I know I'm the man who abandoned you for 25 years. But today, I'm also the man who will stand between you and harm. Today, I'm your alpha, and I will not let you down." The silence that followed was broken by Marcus Flint stepping forward. "We're with you, Alpha. Show us how to fight, and we'll follow." Others echoed the sentiment. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Enough to work with. The journey to Deathfall Canyon took 3 hours of hard hiking through terrain that would have broken less experienced travelers. Ashcroft and Mara led the way, while the rest of the pack split into teams, some moving ahead to prepare the ambush positions, others hanging back to make sure they weren't being followed prematurely. The goal was to make it look like Ashcroft and Mara were alone, vulnerable, an irresistible target. By midday, they had reached the canyon. It was exactly as Mara had described. A narrow gorge carved through ancient stone, walls rising 100 feet on either side, a bottleneck that would force any attacking force into a confined space where numerical superiority meant nothing. Pack members were already in position on the canyon walls, hidden behind rocks and scrub, armed with whatever weapons they could scrounge, rifles, bows, even piles of rocks that could be tumbled down onto anyone below. Ashcroft and Mara took their positions at the far end of the canyon, visible to anyone entering, but far enough in that pursuing them would require committing fully to the narrow space. Now came the hard part, waiting, hoping that Volkov would take the bait, praying that the plan would actually work. "How long do you think before they show?" Mara asked. She sat on a boulder, outwardly relaxed, but Ashcroft could see the tension in her shoulders. Could be hours, could be minutes. Depends on how good their scouts are and how badly Volkov wants us. He wants us badly. This is personal for him. We're the culmination of 30 years of planning, the final revenge against the family that destroyed his. Mara turned her face toward the sun, eyes closed. "I can understand that. If someone had killed my entire family, I'd probably spend my life hunting them too. Even if it meant becoming the monster you were trying to destroy? Especially then, because at least you'd be a monster with a purpose, better than being a useless victim who survived when everyone else died." Before Ashcroft could respond to that bleak assessment, a sound reached his ears. Distant but growing closer, the mechanical growl of engines, all-terrain vehicles, multiple units, approaching fast. Volkov had taken the bait. "They're coming," he said quietly. Around them, hidden among the rocks, the pack tensed. This was it. The moment of truth. "Remember, no one fires until I give the signal. We wait until they're fully committed, until retreat would be as dangerous as advance. Then we hit them with everything." The first vehicle appeared at the canyon entrance, then a second, a third. Men in tactical gear dismounted, weapons at the ready, moving with the professional competence of soldiers who had done this many times before. Ashcroft counted quickly. 15 men, maybe more in the vehicles. Not overwhelming numbers, but heavily armed and clearly well-trained. Leading them was a man who could only be Viktor Volkov. He was tall, lean, with the weathered face of someone who had spent years in harsh climates. His eyes were cold, calculating, and when they fixed on Ashcroft and Mara, there was no emotion in them, no rage, no satisfaction, just cold assessment of targets to be eliminated. "Ashcroft Winterborne," Victor called out, his voice carrying easily across the distance. "And Mara Thornheart, how convenient to find you both in one place. My brother would be pleased." "Your brother was a murderer," Ashcroft replied, keeping his voice steady. "He killed innocents, children. Is that the legacy you want to honor?" "My brother was justice incarnate," Victor countered. "He returned to the Winterborne pack exactly what they had given to us, an eye for an eye, a pack for a pack. The scales are nearly balanced now. Just a few more deaths, and the debt will be paid in full." "There are no scales. There's no cosmic justice keeping score. There's just people making choices and living with the consequences." Ashcroft stood slowly. "Your father died. That's a tragedy. But killing more people doesn't bring him back. It just creates more orphans, more grieving families, more pain that echoes down the generations." Victor smiled, and it was like watching ice crack. "You sound like you're trying to talk me out of this. Did you really think words would work? That I'd suddenly see the error of my ways and walk away?" He raised his hand, and his men moved forward in precise formation. "No, Alpha Winterborne. Today, you die. And tomorrow, I'll come for the rest of your pack. Every last one of them." That was when Ashcroft gave the signal. One sharp whistle, piercing and unmistakable, and Deathfall Canyon erupted into chaos. The ambush detonated like a thunderclap made manifest. From the canyon walls above, the Iron Peak pack unleashed everything they had. Rocks the size of human heads tumbled down in cascades, bouncing off stone walls and shattering into deadly shrapnel. Arrows whistled through the air, some tipped with silver that the pack could barely afford but had saved for precisely this moment. Rifle fire cracked from multiple positions, the reports echoing and re-echoing until it was impossible to tell how many shooters there actually were. Victor's men scattered, professional training warring with primal panic as they sought cover in a space that offered precious little. 2 went down immediately, struck by falling stone before they could react. A third took an arrow through the shoulder and fell screaming. But these were not amateurs. Even under fire, they returned disciplined for chaos, establishing defensive positions behind their vehicles, laying down suppressing fire toward the canyon walls. Ashcroft and Mara were already moving, sprinting deeper into the canyon where the walls narrowed further, where Victor's forces would have to follow single file if they wanted to pursue. The plan was simple in concept if nightmarish in execution. Draw them in, bleed them, force them into a retreat through the same killing ground they had just entered. But Victor was not cooperating. Instead of pursuing blindly, he was pulling his men back toward the canyon entrance, recognizing the trap for what it was. His voice carried sharp commands in Russian, and his soldiers responded with the smooth coordination of men who had trained together extensively. They were retreating in good order, maintaining fire discipline, covering each other's movements. This was the nightmare scenario. If Victor escaped now, he would return with more men, better preparation, and the knowledge of exactly what tactics the pack favored. Declan saw it too. From his position on the north wall, he made a decision that would haunt him for whatever time remained. He stood up, exposing himself to enemy fire, and transformed mid-leap. His wolf form was a streak of russet fury, sailing 20 feet down to land directly on one of the all-terrain vehicles. His weight crushed the hood, his claws tore through metal and plastic, and in seconds the vehicle was inoperable, blocking the narrow canyon entrance. Bullets found him immediately. Silver-tipped rounds that punched through fur and flesh that prevented his supernatural healing from doing more than slowing the bleeding. Declan roared, pain and defiance mingled, and threw himself at the nearest soldier. They went down together in a tangle of claws and terror, and when they separated, the soldier was not getting back up. But Declan was down too, his hind leg shattered by a direct hit, blood pooling beneath him. He had bought them time and closed the trap, but the cost was written in crimson across frozen ground. Sienna screamed her fury from the south wall and followed her mentor's example, transforming and leaping down to join the close-quarters battle. She was faster than Declan, harder to hit, and she moved through Victor's men like a wind of teeth and rage. 2 more soldiers fell before they could properly react, throats torn out with surgical precision. Marcus Flint came next, his massive gray wolf form crushing a man beneath his landing weight before engaging 2 more in a whirlwind of violence. All along the canyon walls, pack members abandoned their ranged positions and committed to close combat, recognizing that this was no longer an ambush, but a pitched battle for survival. Ashcroft reversed course, running back toward the chaos rather than away from it. His alpha instincts screamed that his people were in danger, that they needed him, that leadership meant standing at the point of greatest peril. He transformed mid-stride, his dark wolf bursting forth with a size and power that made even Victor's professional soldiers hesitate. Mara was beside him, her copper wolf smaller but no less fierce, navigating the battlefield by sound and scent with an accuracy that seemed impossible for someone who could not see. She had spent 8 years learning to live without sight. Now she would prove that blindness was not the same as helplessness. The battle compressed into a maelstrom of violence that defied easy description. Wolves and humans intertwined in deadly dance, each side trying to exploit the weaknesses of the other. The soldiers had firepower and training. The pack had numbers and supernatural resilience. It was chaos and chance and the 1,000 small decisions that accumulated into victory or death. Victor himself had not transformed, which told Ashcroft something crucial. Either the man was not actually a werewolf, just a human who had learned his family's history and taken up their vendetta, or he was holding back, waiting for the moment when his intervention would matter most. Either way, he stood behind his defensive line, that same cold calculation in his eyes, a pistol in each hand, shooting with mechanical precision at any wolf that came too close. Ashcroft fought his way toward that cold-eyed man, recognizing that this battle would not truly end until Victor Volkov was no longer capable of issuing orders. He crashed through the defensive line like a battering ram, accepting wounds that would have killed a human 3 times over, relying on his supernatural healing to keep him functional long enough to reach his target. A soldier with a shotgun nearly ended him. The blast caught Ashcroft in the side at point-blank range, silver pellets shredding muscle and cracking ribs. He went down, and for a terrible moment he thought this was it, that he had survived 45 years only to die in a frozen canyon before he could make amends for anything. Then Mara was there, her jaws closing on the soldier's wrist, her weight bearing him down. The shotgun clattered away. Ashcroft struggled to his feet, the world spinning, copper taste of blood thick in his mouth. He could feel his body trying to heal, supernatural flesh knitting back together. But it was slow, painfully slow, because silver interfered with the process. Victor saw his opportunity. He moved with smooth efficiency, both pistols tracking toward Ashcroft's head. At this range, with silver ammunition, even an alpha would not survive. The shot never came. Declan, bleeding and broken, dragged himself forward with his front legs and lunged at Victor from behind. His jaws caught the man's knee, crushing it with a sound like breaking branches. Victor screamed, actually screamed, the first real emotion he had shown. His pistols barked, both bullets finding Declan's body, but the damage was done. Victor was down, unable to stand, his cold precision shattered by pain and shock. The battle turned in that moment. Victor's men saw their commander fall, and their discipline cracked. Some broke entirely, running for the blocked canyon entrance and trying to climb over the ruined vehicle. Others fought with the desperation of men who knew they were going to die and wanted to take as many enemies with them as possible. Ashcroft reached Victor and transformed back to human, standing over the man who had come to finish what his brother started. Up close, he could see the resemblance. Same sharp features, same cold eyes. But where Constantine had been driven by grief, Victor was driven by something darker. Not love for what he had lost, but hatred for what remained. "You've lost," Ashcroft said, breathing hard, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. "Call off your men. Surrender. There's been enough death." Victor laughed, the sound wet and pained. "Surrender? To wolves who murdered my family?" He spat blood. "My brother was right about your kind. Monsters pretending it's civilization. You deserve everything that's coming." "What's coming?" Ashcroft felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "What did you do?" Victor's smile was triumphant despite his pain. "Did you think I would come here with just 20 men? That I would commit everything to one assault?" He laughed again. "While you were busy with us, 50 more of my people were moving into position around your settlement. By now, they've surrounded it completely. Your elderly, your children, everyone you left behind. They're all hostages now." The words hit like physical blows. Ashcroft felt the weight of command become crushing. He had been outmaneuvered. While he had been focused on the visible threat, Victor had been executing a more sophisticated strategy. "You're lying," Sienna said, having transformed back to human. Blood marked her face and hands. "Am I?" Victor pulled out a radio with his good hand, thumbed the transmit button. "Eagle 1 to Eagle Nest. Respond." Static for a moment, then a voice, professional and calm. "Eagle Nest responding. Objective secured. 0 resistance. Awaiting orders." Victor looked at Ashcroft. "I have 48 of your people. They're all gathered in your council hall, surrounded by armed men with orders to execute them if my team doesn't report in exactly 90 minutes. So you see, Alpha Winterborne, you didn't win anything today." Mara moved before anyone could stop her. She transformed, her wolf lunging forward, jaws open to tear out Victor's throat. But Ashcroft was faster, his own transformation instantaneous, his larger body intercepting her, bearing her down. When they had both transformed back to human, Mara was shaking with rage. "He's right there! We can end this!" "They absolutely will follow through on execution," Ashcroft replied grimly. "These are professionals with orders. We need him alive to call off his people." "So what? We just let him win?" "No, we used the time he gave us." Ashcroft turned back to Victor. "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. The extinction of everyone who carries Winterborne blood. You, Mara, Sienna. You have 90 minutes to deliver yourselves to my men at your settlement. You come alone. You submit to execution. In exchange, everyone else lives. And if we don't? Then 48 people die, children watching their grandparents executed, all because you valued your own lives over theirs." Marcus spoke up. "You're not seriously considering this? If you surrender now, the pack loses its leadership, and we still have to face whoever Victor has lined up as his successor." "He's right," Sienna added. "There has to be another way." Declan, lying in the snow, breathing shallowly, his wolf form slowly reverting to human, managed to speak. "Their forward operating base. It's undefended now. Everyone is either here or at the settlement. If we can get to their base, we can use their equipment to countermand his orders." It was a slender thread, but it was something. Ashcroft's mind raced. The enemy base was 3 miles south. With the men here neutralized, it might be lightly defended or even empty. "How long to reach the base?" Ashcroft asked. 20 minutes at a dead run in wolf form," Marcus replied. Ashcroft did the math. 20 minutes to the base, 10 minutes to locate and access communications. That left them 60 minutes as buffer. Tight, but possible. "Marcus, Sienna, 3 others who can keep pace. You come with me. Mara, you stay here with the wounded." "No," Mara said flatly. "I know Victor's voice. I've been listening to him. If you're going to impersonate him over radio, you need me to coach the speaker." She was right. Ashcroft nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but if you fall behind, we're not waiting." They assembled quickly. 6 wolves, Ashcroft, Mara, Sienna, Marcus, and 2 others named Elena and Thomas. Before they left, Ashcroft knelt beside Declan. "Don't you dare die," Ashcroft said quietly. "That's an order." Declan managed a weak smile. "Never been good at following orders, but I'll try." He gripped Ashcroft's arm. "Now go. Save our people." The run to Victor's base pushed them to their limits. The terrain was brutal, all steep inclines and treacherous footing. Mara kept pace through sheer determination, her other senses compensating for her lack of vision, but Ashcroft could see the strain. 83 minutes remaining when they arrived. The base was exactly as described: military-grade tents, communications antenna, and critically, only 3 guards visible. They circled, staying downwind, counting personnel. The 3 guards were armed but not alert. This was supposed to be the safe rear area. Ashcroft led the assault personally, his massive dark wolf exploding from cover. The guard barely had time to shout before Ashcroft's weight bore him down. A precise application of jaw pressure, and the guard was unconscious. The other 2 guards were down almost as quickly. 79 minutes remaining. They transformed back, and Sienna made straight for the communications tent. Inside was a full suite of military radio equipment, still powered on and connected. "I can work with this," Sienna said, "but we need frequencies and authentication codes." Mara was already searching the unconscious guards. Her hands moved efficiently, finding a small notebook in one guard's pocket. "Frequencies are here. Authentication code for today is Eagle 77. 76 minutes remaining. Sienna powered up the radio. "I don't sound like Victor. He's got a Russian accent, deeper voice. They'll know immediately." "Then I need someone to coach me," Ashcroft said. "Mara, teach me to sound like him." For the next precious minutes, Mara provided intensive instruction. The way Victor's accent affected certain consonants, the slight rasp in his voice, the cold, emotionless delivery, the habit of pausing fractionally before proper nouns. Ashcroft practiced, adjusting based on her corrections. It was not perfect, but it might work. 70 minutes remaining. "I'm opening the channel," Sienna said. "1 shot. Make it count." Ashcroft took the microphone, feeling its weight. He pressed the transmit button. "Eagle Nest, this is Eagle 1. Respond." He let Victor's accent color his words. Static. Then the response. "Eagle 1, Eagle Nest responding. What is your status?" "Objective achieved at Canyon. Alpha and primary targets neutralized. Prepare for Phase 2 termination, but delay execution 24 hours. Repeat, delay execution 24 hours. I want the pack to see what's left of their leaders before we eliminate the rest." A pause. "Eagle 1, that was not the agreed protocol. Please confirm authentication." Authentication Eagle 77. Delay is necessary for psychological impact. We want maximum suffering. The pack needs to understand completely that they've lost. The pause stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Ashcroft felt sweat forming despite the cold. "Eagle 1, understood. Execution delayed 24 hours. We'll maintain position and await your arrival for confirmation." Ashcroft released the transmit button. 24 hours. That's what we bought." "To do what?" Sienna asked. "They're still holding hostages in a defended position." "We interrogate these guards," Ashcroft said, gesturing to the 3 unconscious men. "Find out Victor's full strength, where his reserves are, what his complete plan was. Then we use that intelligence." When the guards regained consciousness, stripped of weapons and facing wolves who could tear them apart, they talked. Victor had brought 120 soldiers total. 20 had attacked the canyon. 50 were at the settlement. The remaining 50 were in reserve, staged 15 miles south. "They'll know something is wrong soon," one guard said. "There's a scheduled check-in every 4 hours. If the canyon team doesn't report, the reserve force investigates. You've got maybe 90 minutes before they come looking." Ashcroft absorbed this. 90 minutes to rescue 50 soldiers holding 48 hostages, while knowing 50 more enemy reinforcements were less than an hour away if things went wrong. "We make them think Constantine has returned," Mara said suddenly. "Victor's brother, the one who led the Blood Moon massacre. If his voice suddenly appears on their radio claiming he's come back to punish Victor for continuing a vendetta that should have ended, even professional soldiers might break." It was audacious. Konstantin Volkov had been the boogeyman of the Iron Peak Pack for 8 years. His voice returning from the dead might crack even trained discipline. "You'd have to get close enough for them to hear," Ashcroft said. "Close enough that they'd kill you. Then we make sure they listen long enough for doubt to take root." They moved on the settlement with shadows lengthening. 4 wolves approached from the north, using terrain they knew intimately. Mara walked openly from the south, carrying a radio, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Konstantin Volkov," her borrowed voice crackled. "I know you think I am dead. I assure you, I am very much alive, and I am coming for you. Every man who followed my foolish brother into this doomed vendetta. I am coming, and I will show you what real terror looks like." The effect was immediate. The Iron Peak pack could hear confusion over intercepted radio chatter, uncertainty and fear creeping into professional voices. Some had been part of Konstantin's original attack. The thought that he might have returned, might be coming to punish everyone involved, was enough to crack discipline. 3 soldiers deserted immediately. Others hesitated, looking to officers for guidance that was not forthcoming. That was when Ashcroft and the others struck. 4 wolves exploding from cover, hitting the weakened perimeter. The battle was short and brutal. Victor's soldiers were good, but they were demoralized, confused, fighting an enemy they believed was supernatural. Half surrendered within minutes. The other half died, defending positions they no longer believed in. When the smoke cleared, the Iron Peak pack stood victorious. Inside the council hall, 48 hostages emerged shaken but unharmed. Thomas Ironclaw appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on younger pack members, but his eyes were bright. His voice carried across the settlement. "The trials are complete," Thomas declared. "Ashcroft Winterborne has passed the test of combat against 3 warriors. He has survived the trial of wisdom under impossible pressure, choosing strategy over emotion. And he has endured the trial of endurance, running through mountain terrain to save his people when surrender would have been easier. By the old laws, I declare him Alpha of the Iron Peak pack. Do any challenge this claim?" Silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because this man had proven himself in blood and sacrifice. "Then let it be known," Thomas continued. "Ashcroft Winterborne is our Alpha, and Mara Thornheart is acknowledged as Luna and Second. Together they will lead us." Mara stiffened. "I never agreed to that." "You don't have to agree," Thomas replied gently. "You just have to accept what you've proven. Your father wanted it. In his will, he specified that you should lead if you ever found your way back from grief. Today, you took those steps." Ashcroft turned to Mara. She nodded once, a commitment made without words. The pack howled then, a sound that echoed off the mountains. Not grief, not loneliness, but recognition, acceptance. They had found their Alpha and Luna. 3 months passed like water through cupped hands. Winter gave way reluctantly to spring, snow melting to reveal earth that had been frozen since before the Blood Moon massacre. The Iron Peak pack rebuilt what had been broken, fortified what remained vulnerable, and mourned those who had fallen in the canyon and the settlement both. Thomas Ironclaw passed away in his sleep 2 weeks after the battle, his conscience finally at peace after 3 decades of carrying the secret of Ravensbrück. They buried him with full honors beside Aldrich and the other fallen Alphas, his name carved into stone as the Beta who had finally told the truth. Declan survived his wounds, though he walked with a permanent limp and would never fight with quite the same ferocity. He wore his scars with quiet pride, a reminder of the day he had thrown himself at a superior force to buy his Alpha time. He remained as advisor, his tactical mind too valuable to waste. Sienna took the position of Beta formally, her fierce loyalty and strategic thinking making her ideal for the role. She and Mara slowly rebuilt their relationship, 2 sisters separated by grief learning to be family again. Viktor Volkov's remaining forces scattered after their leader's capture. Some fled the country, others simply vanished into whatever shadows had spawned them. Viktor himself sat in a cell beneath the council hall, his shattered knee healing slowly, and Ashcroft visited him once before winter ended. "Your brother came for revenge and found it," Ashcroft said through the bars. "He paid the blood debt he believed was owed. But you continued it out of habit rather than justice. That's the difference between him and you. He was driven by love of what he lost. You were driven by hate of what remained." Viktor said nothing, his cold eyes tracking Ashcroft's movements. "I'm not going to kill you," Ashcroft continued. "That would just perpetuate the cycle. Instead, you'll live here until you die of old age, with nothing but time to think about how your hatred accomplished exactly nothing. Your brother's vendetta ended with Aldrich. Yours ends with you, locked in a cell, forgotten." He turned to leave, then paused. "And if any of your people come looking for you, they'll find a pack that's ready. That's learned. That won't be caught unprepared again. Tell them that, if anyone bothers to visit." On a night when the moon hung full and heavy in a sky swept clean of clouds, Ashcroft found himself looking out over the territory he was sworn to protect. Not from the walls this time, but from the open ground where the pack gathered for celebrations and mourning both. Mara joined him, moving with the confidence of someone who had relearned the settlement's geography. "We did it," she said quietly. "We survived," Ashcroft corrected. "There's a difference. Maybe that's all we can ask for, to survive with honor, to protect what matters, to build something worth defending." She paused. "My father would be proud, angry that you stayed away so long, but proud of who you became." "I hope so. I'm trying to be the alpha he was, but it's harder than it looks." "Good. If it was easy, you'd be doing it wrong." They stood together in comfortable silence, Alpha and Luna, two broken people who had found a way to be whole together. Around them, the pack moved through evening routines, secure in the knowledge that someone was watching, that someone cared, that they were protected by leaders who had proven themselves in the crucible of impossible choices. In the spring that followed, Mara gave birth to a son. They named him Aldrich, after the Alpha who had held the pack together through impossible times, who had called for his brother with his dying breath, who had believed that redemption was possible even for those who had run away. The child was perfect in all the ways that mattered. Strong, healthy, born into a pack that had survived its darkest hour and emerged tempered like steel. And far to the south, beyond the boundaries of Iron Peak territory, in a room that smelled of antiseptic and old anger, Victor Volkov sat alone and planned. Because revenge, true revenge, was not served hot or cold. It was served inevitable. But that was a threat for another day. For now, under skies that promised rain and renewal both, the Iron Peak pack allowed themselves to hope, to believe that they had earned a future worth fighting for. And in that hope, they found something more valuable than victory. They found purpose. They found family. They found the strength to face whatever came next, together. The Wolf Lord's atonement was not complete. It would never be complete. Atonement was not a destination but a journey, measured in days of service rather than moments of sacrifice. But it had begun, and that perhaps was enough.